going through the usual performance data. And we are then going to be looking at a thematic topic around AI and the use of live facial recognition technology. We have a spotlight section, which is where I'm going to be raising a number of issues that have come to been particularly pertinent from members of the public with me over the last couple of months. We've got a series of third-party reports, although I think it is just the one on HMIC that we'll be looking at today. And then we've got a couple of public questions at the end of the meeting that have been submitted via the website. Just to introduce myself, so I'm Jo Coles, I'm the Deputy Mayor for Policing, Fire and Crime for York and North Yorkshire. So I work alongside the Mayor, David Skaith, in holding the Chief Constable of North Yorkshire Police to account. We also have on the call members of North Yorkshire Police who will be presenting presentations this afternoon. So we've got ACC Ben Mosley, who will be presenting, and DCI Jez Bartlett, who is presenting on AI and artificial intelligence. And we also have members of the Police, Fire and Crime team within York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority. Apologies from Amanda Wilkinson in the PFC team, but we have got Tamara Stevens, the Director for Police, Fire and Crime, and Mark Ayres on the call, who are in my team. We also have two people who've got their cameras off, who will be making sure that the technology works as it needs to during the course of the meeting. I've got apologies from the Deputy Chief Constable, Scott Bissett, but I don't know, Chief Constable, if you just wanted to introduce yourself and anything else you wanted to say before we started.
No, Scott is on leave at the moment, so he does send his apologies. But no, I'm Tim Fulber, I'm the Chief Constable of North Yorkshire Police. Ben today is joining me in Scott's absence, so I will deal with the performance slides. Ben will deal with the HMIC slides, just for your management of the meeting.
Yep. We can start then. I think that's it in terms of introductions, so we can kick off with the first presentation, which is the performance data. So this we look at every time, I think.
Yeah. So I don't know if you want me to take you through the slides, or do you just want to ask me some questions about pertinent bits. I'm happy to take your lead, Deputy Mayor.
So if we can just take it slide by slide. I mean, I'm just aware that this is a particularly busy time for policing in North Yorkshire. So in terms of 999 and 101, obviously it's a busy time for people in the control room. Huge thanks to them for everything they're doing, but just any insights in terms of that data, if we can just look at that performance data, but anything around seasonal trends would be really helpful.
I mean, I think what you can see is that the control room is continuing to hold its own in terms of handling 999 data, 999 calls. It is an exceptionally busy time, and just to put it into context, you know, the last week we've had exceptionally hot weather. We've got the World Cup on as well, plus the seasonal tourism that we enjoy here in North Yorkshire. Last week we had just over 3,000 999 calls compared to 2,400 in the same week last year. So that just gives you a sense of it is exceptionally busy. And I think what you can see from that is that the control room is continuing to hold its own in terms of providing that service to the public, which is really testament to the exceptionally hard working staff who work in the and those who lead our call handling function. But it is an exceptionally busy time at the moment.
And presumably also a time when call handlers might also be taking leave. So just also how does the service just ensure that level of consistency, given that line is reassuringly straight? Just how you manage that, given that staff will also want to be taking leave at this time of year?
Absolutely. So one of the most central planks of the broader improvements that the force has delivered over the past 2 years is that we have a very, very clear workforce strategy. We have a really good understanding of our demand, and we make sure that our operating model is set up in order to meet that demand as best we can across the year. Of course, we recognise that demand is busier in the summer, and I have to say, during my entire police career, I've never worked in a force that has such a difference between its summer demand and its winter demand. And our resource management unit puts in a lot of effort right from the start of the year, making sure that we plan our resource planning right across the summer months. There are restrictions on when people can not everyone can take leave at the same time, but we work very, very hard to make sure that we've got the resources available at the right time, and that some of our staff can take leave, which is obviously important as well over the summer months.
Great, thank you. Can we just have a quick look at the 101 data, which obviously has been a more mixed picture, albeit that seems to be in a downward trajectory more broadly. Just anything really just in terms of obviously the target looks like it's being met pretty consistently now since the beginning of 2005. But again, the summer challenges question, I guess, for 101, as well as obviously the 999 calls get prioritised, understandably.
They do, and like I said, obviously we had a significant increase in the number of 999 calls. We've also seen an increase in the number of 101 calls, and you know, it's an issue that I know is frequently raised with you. It's frequently raised with me in terms of the time that it takes to answer the phone for a non-emergency call. Well, what we aim to do is answer the calls within 5 minutes, and you can see from the data there that you know, most recently we're answering well in excess of 80% of calls within 5 minutes, and that performance has significantly improved on where we were a couple of years ago. Of course, that performance in relation to the non-emergency calls is inextricably linked to our performance answering emergency calls, because it's the same group of people doing it, and it is a fact that we will prioritise those emergency calls, and when people are engaged on emergency calls, there's less people to answer 101. But we do have the facility for people to register for a callback, and we obviously do have an online presence as well. What I would say to people is, if you need us, call us, but if there are other ways of dealing with it, if you can deal with your query online, if you want us to call you back at a time is convenient for you, we're more than happy to do that.
And my only other question, I suppose, is given that that is a much improved picture, the issue that's been raised with me, and I'm sure would be one that gets raised with police officers more widely, is I was at a public meeting in Helmsley the other day about antisocial behaviour, trying to ensure that residents were actually reporting incidents when they happened. How do we get the message out to the public that actually that performance in terms of 101 is significantly better than where we were a couple of years ago, and actually that means that it is really important that people are picking up the phone or using the online reporting mechanism to report in that antisocial behaviour if it's happening in their community?
Yeah, I think in some ways you've set it out there. Is, you know, as the Chief Constable, I have to make decisions about what we will prioritise and what we won't prioritise, and like any public service, we can't do everything. We are absolutely determined that we're on the side of the communities of North Yorkshire, and we are acutely aware that if people have localised antisocial behaviour in their communities, that significantly impacts on their quality of life. People must report it to us, you know, even if that's to an officer in the street, but if they ring it into the control room, send in an online form to let us know what is happening there, because it's only when we do that that, you know, we can work out then where our resources can have the most impact. Please don't hesitate to call us, you know, if it's a matter that you think needs the police's attention. You know, much gets made about people ringing the police for all sorts of spurious reasons, and there are obvious examples of that, but that one of those is not when you need our help. You know, if you're the victim of antisocial behaviour, it's vital that you let us know about it. We've made a significant investment in our neighbourhood teams, and we are determined to support you.
Great, brilliant. We can move on to the next question. Next slide, sorry. Thank you.
So this is response times, which again you can see. I mean, we did have a bit of a dip in terms of our rural response in May, but that's now climbing back up. And again, what you can see is a picture over a number of years where that has continued to improve. And it's vital that we make sure that we have a response to calls for service that meets the expectations of the public. And it is also a fact that if we get there in a timely manner, we can undertake a better, more timely investigation, which is much more likely to either lead to a criminal justice outcome but we'll probably be better able to support the victim. So it's it's a really important area of work, and again one that is always a challenge in the summer months, because as I've just quoted to you, the number of calls that we've got translates into more incidents, and it's not as though we have a huge amount of extra police officers in the summer. We do have a summer demand plan, so we do bring people out of various roles that support the front line of policing to enhance our ability to meet demand. But as you can see, generally there is a continued improving picture across the board.
And just an explanation, which I know I've asked for previously, but the difference in terms of those immediate responses and the priority responses, I think, is it one's 1 hour?
Yeah, so priority responses within an hour. In terms of an immediate response, what we say is 15 minutes in an urban area, 20 minutes in a rural area. And that's very common with other forces that have similar geography to us. With a force the size of North Yorkshire, to get to an emergency in rural, the reality is it does take 20 minutes on occasions, because officers are driving across rural, very windy country roads, and it just simply takes longer to get there.
Great. Yeah, we can move on to the next slide.
So this slide relates to antisocial behaviour, and what you can see there is that there has been a reduction across the county, 5.6% compared to last year, and you see that varies across the county command. And again, I suppose just for members of the public, we're divided into 3 geographical areas in North Yorkshire in the way that we structure policing. We have our city command, which encompasses Selby as well. We then have the coastal command, which actually incorporates Ryedale as well, but basically the whole of the coast from Farling right the way up to Whitby. And then the county command is everything else across North Yorkshire. And you can see the just over 0.5% reduction in the city command, 5.1% decrease in the coastal command, and 12.7% in the county command area.
I suppose my question about antisocial behaviour is probably similar to my previous question. It's great that it's coming down, and certainly compared to last year. How do we know, and maybe this is an unfair question, but how do we know that the drop is not down to underreporting in terms of incidents being reported, and whether or not there are, for example, those informal reports that you mentioned earlier in terms of people who might be reporting informal intelligence into a neighbourhood policing team, for example, and whether or not that is being captured as antisocial behaviour data, or maybe that kind of intelligence is now being captured differently.
Well, you'll be aware that when HMIC come in, they do what we call a crime and incident data integrity audit on us, which we've certainly in the most recent inspections come out favourably in terms of recording. I suppose I'll take that in 2 parts really. Is how do you know for certain this is not about underreporting? Well, I suppose the honest answer is you can never be certain, but as you're well aware, Deputy Mayor, we do enjoy high levels of public confidence than many other forces in the country. And my sense of the nature of North Yorkshire is people don't shy away from telling the police if there's a problem in the local communities. The fact that we have invested more in neighbourhood policing over the past 2 years again means that there is a greater presence in those communities, so the officers themselves get a sense of what is happening in terms of issues that matter most to the community, because they're visible in those communities, because they are holding engagement sessions with local communities, and that then means that we're in a better position to be able to target ASB hotspots. I think that the really important thing is through that investment in neighbourhood policing and making sure that we've invested in problem solving, not just attacking it in a piecemeal way, by making sure that where we've got hotspots and repeat incidents of antisocial behaviour, that we're tackling it in a structured, evidence-based way. That is what has led to the difference over the past 2 years in terms of a reduction in antisocial behaviour. and our determination is that we'll continue to develop that. You know, that we've got a good platform now in terms of our neighbourhood policing teams. The increase in officers is being delivered again across the course of this financial year. And what that will mean for communities is that you've got more local officers dealing with the issues that matter most to local communities. And that's really, really important.
Yeah, and I suppose I think that combination of that data compared with the 101 data that we just looked at is the picture of reassurance to the public, that which is why they need to pick up the phone if things are happening. The volumes are going down, but if that's not their experience, then they really do need to be reporting those incidents in, because actually the calls will get picked up via 101 or via the online form. So it's certainly, you know, I'm sure it happens to North Yorkshire police officers as much as it happens, in fact, probably more so than it happens to me. But people are constantly telling me that problems are there, and I'll be constantly saying they need to make sure that those things are being reported. Just any final messages that combine that antisocial behaviour question with that 101 data question on the slide that we just looked at?
Well, I mean, again, you know, what I would want to reassure the public is that we take this really seriously. You know, you know, I often talk about the purpose of North Yorkshire Police is to make sure that we keep people safe and make sure that they feel safe. And antisocial behaviour consistently is the thing that strikes fear in the hearts of communities, because it impinges on people, how people actually feel about their area. So it's really important. You know, we've got a good 101 service now. We've got an increasing online offer. And if you do have issues in your area, it's vitally important that you contact us and let us know.
Great, thank you. We can move on to the next slide.
This you'll see is basically crime volume and arrests over the course of the past 12 months, and you'll see in the you know, as ever, there's always certain areas that you will see a rise in crime. But you know, if you look at some of those key categories of crime, bicycle theft down 30%, you know, shoplifting down 10% across the course of the year, vehicle crime down 19%. So you've seen some really significant reductions in crime. Overall crime down by 2.8%. That's fine. You know, it's great that crime is coming down, but what we don't do is rest on our laurels. You know, we've had some issues over the course of the past 12 months, particularly in relation to robbery. Now, some of that is about how robbery is classified, but some of it is about issues, particularly in York, issues with, you know, illegal e-bikes, that sort of thing. We are absolutely determined that we're going to continue that trend, continue to drive down crime across North Yorkshire, because it is and remains the safest county in England in terms of crime per capita, and we're determined to keep it that way.
Great, thanks. So two questions on this slide. One is that you just kind of mentioned, but there is some significant improvements in a lot of the high volume crimes that will have been affecting members of the public, which I think is incredibly positive. You know, from burglaries to bicycle theft and thefts in general. I think that's incredibly positive. I think, however, the public would be probably quite concerned by some of the crimes that are going in the other direction, which particularly feel like some of the very serious kind of violent crime or drug related offences or sexual offences. So just anything in terms of, does that mean we're being targeted by something differently to maybe how things were a year ago? Just any insight into not wanting to deflect from the obviously really positive green numbers, but also just really important to understand what's going on with the red ones as well.
So if you take possession of weapons and drug offences, the recording of drug offences and possession of weapons tends to be driven by the proactivity of the police. So the fact that we have put you know, more neighbourhood officers into our localities, and that they are out being proactive, they are finding people suspected of, you know, supplying drugs, finding people in possession of weapons, that tends to drive that more than anything as a measure of proactivity. The area that's particularly concerned me, and we've had conversations both in previous online public meetings and in strategic oversight board, was the rise in robbery last year. Now, some of this, as I've said, was about the way that robbery is classified, but not all of it. And we have in the past year had an issue, particularly with e-bikes being used to commit robbery. We are making some headway with that now, you know, and you'd have seen some of the things that we've done very publicly in terms of seizing e-bikes and crushing them. You know, we've used our drones extensively to track these offenders, to find out where they live, and then go and seize the bikes afterwards and dealing with them. And we're absolutely determined. And you know, I want to give a very, very clear message: is if you are using an e-bike in an illegal way, whether that's to commit antisocial behaviour, but particularly if you're using it to commit crime, you know, we have officers out there. They are trained. They are determined to catch you. You know, our drones are up monitoring people undertaking this sort of behaviour, and we will prosecute you, and we will take the bikes off you, and they will be crushed.
Yeah, no, I think that, and actually, I think the not only the action itself, but also the messaging that's gone around those actions in terms of the wider public. I think that those messages have been cutting through.
Yeah.
Not that that's enough, because I think,
Yeah.
you know, you have to keep these things have to keep going. That's really helpful on that. My other question was just around certain crime types which are quite hard to separate out of this data. So
Okay.
obviously one of the priorities that the mayor and I have set is around violence against women and girls.
Yeah.
Those are crimes that are quite difficult to extrapolate from these crime volume data statistics. I'm not saying that's a North Yorkshire Police only problem, but it is
No, it's not.
certainly something that I'm kind of keen to better understand, how I get a sense of where the force is at in terms of tackling violence against women and girls, in particular domestic abuse, and where that might sit as an offence type in this data, given that I know it's quite a high volume number of cases that the police will be dealing with. It's quite hard to understand where that sits in the data.
Yeah, I mean, we can do that, and we can look at breaking it down. I mean, the one thing I always say about domestic abuse is, you know, there's plenty of evidence that suggests that people suffer domestic abuse and violence on many, 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 many occasions before they report it to the police. I want more people to report it. So, you know, we do take, you know, if you look at burglary, for example, if it's showing green and going down, generally that's a good thing. If it's glowing red and going up, generally that's a bad thing. It's not as clear cut with domestic abuse, because actually if people are getting increasingly confident and see that how seriously we take it, if they can see and hear about the package of support that we can wrap around people who are the victim of domestic abuse, and particularly those who are the victim of coercive and controlling behaviour, you know, and I'm thinking not just about what the police do, but what the commission services do. The fact that it might be red isn't necessarily a bad thing. So you've got to look at it in a more nuanced way. And I think then you get into, you know, the fact that someone's reported domestic abuse is a good thing. You know, things like repeat victimization and things like that, they're the really interesting statistics that I think it'd be useful to perhaps drill down into a little bit more.
And would it be fair to say that domestic abuse currently will be on there, but it will be on there under violence against the person or public order offences?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So just from a public assurance perspective, those crimes are being captured. It's just currently quite difficult for us to extrapolate that data from this data.
I think there's something just about, I mean, obviously, as I know you're well aware, we have many different performance forums right across the force, and we've got all sorts of data. You know, absolutely, we could produce domestic abuse statistics very easily.
Right. I think again, just in terms of public confidence and encouraging people to report, I think that would be really welcome. I think I had a meeting last week with a couple of other police forces and local authorities about their practice it was Essex and Islington. So I was just keen to kind of understand how I test their good practice against the work that's going on, which I know is going on across North Yorkshire Police. as part of
Yeah.
the safeguarding team's work that they're doing.
So I mean, I can tell you now in terms of domestic violence crime this year, so that's from the start of April to June, it's up by 6.5%. That's 108 additional domestic violence crimes that have been reported to North Yorkshire Police. Now, not all of those will have a male perpetrator and a female victim.
Absolutely,
a lot will. Now, you could ask the question: is that 108 more victims, or is that 108 more people who have reported? Did those 108 people not report last year? So it's really, I personally think with domestic abuse, you've got to have a look at your statistics. They are important. You've got to then have a conversation with your advocacy services around domestic abuse. What are they seeing? What's the sense of feedback that they're getting from service users? And take a broader holistic approach right across all the commission services around violence against women and girls to get a sense of, do we think that do we think that the volumes are going up or down? Do we think that we're getting an increasing level of confidence amongst people to report? And of those people who report, are they getting what they want? Now, for some people, that'll be a criminal justice outcome. For others, it will just be that they want it to stop. For others, it will be the need to get support to get their lives back on track, or it could be people have very diverse needs, and it's really important that I think we as the police service understand that, and in terms of scrutinizing our response, it's very much about partnership response.
Yeah. No, absolutely, and the police is only one agency in this picture completely. Okay, that's really helpful on that slide. We can move on to the next one.
So
I think, yeah. Do you want to do an intro? I don't really have massive questions about it, except again just to understand. Obviously, there's lots of really encouraging a picture, and also it's how do we compare? Because I think sometimes those numbers can feel quite low, but actually my understanding is North Yorkshire Police, although the numbers are low and we'd all like them to be higher in terms of outcomes, North Yorkshire is doing relatively well compared to other areas.
We are. I mean, I suppose the first thing is what it shows is a trend is that we are, for the past 2 years, we're seeing the number of crimes successfully investigated with a positive judicial outcome continuing to grow. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we have one of the highest outcome rates in the country, and particularly so in terms of the number of people that we charge. An area that I think we can do more on is out of court disposals. I look at, for example, Cheshire Police seem to be doing some good work in that area, which I'm keen to explore. But by and large, a positive picture, and certainly in terms of our investigative performance, we're up there with some of the best forces in the country.
Great, that's fine on that one, thank you.
So this is obviously, it takes us to stop search in terms of what have we done. I don't think this slide has changed too much since the one that was on the last OPM. The obvious thing that I'll just deal with straight away is that it says there that we've stopped and searched 5 people aged 10 and under, which would cause most people to take a sharp intake of breath, myself included. That is examples of adults who have refused to give their age, and it's an administrative issue. We have not stopped 5 people aged 10 and under.
That's very reassuring. A similar question for the over 34s, which obviously is a known age group and obviously all adult, but is there another category within that that might also be considered vulnerable? So for example, the most elderly, or any other cohort that actually I ought to also have assurances around. Just because they're adults, that doesn't mean they're not vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this data relates purely to age. That's something we can take away and have a look at. We've certainly no one's brought it to my attention that we've had any particular notable cases of pensions been stopped and searched. But it's certainly something we could take away and have a look at.
Great. And look, ultimately the most vulnerable will always be the younger ones that you'd be most
Absolutely.
concerned about. But then equally, it would be useful to have the assurance around the other end of the age scale, for sure. And my only other question, the kind of is it the arrest data following a stop and search, the comparison, how do we the arrest outcome group, which I think is 23%,
Yeah.
does that sit in a comfortable space in terms of
Yes.
most similar forces?
Yes, it does. It does. You tend to find that forces like ours tend to have a fairly high outcome rate. If you've got a metropolitan force where they're doing much higher volumes of stop and search, they tend to be at the lower end. But no, that is a pretty good comparatively.
Great. No more questions on this slide. Thanks. Oh, I think I've got it here.
So this slide just, I mean, again, some of it just talks to the age issue. It's just shown in a different way. And then the top slide just talks to the ethnicity of.
Oh, I asked this at the last meeting. That's why we're providing this extra data.
Right. Remind me what the question was,
ethnicity
Joe.
So the question was, we had a significant number of non-stated ethnicities in the stop and search data. And my question last time was,
how does that compare?
How do we compare in that terms of people not disclosing or not stating their ethnicity, or whether it's officers not asking or whether people not stating? How do we compare to other forces? And that data is now in that chart in terms of we're at 16.8%, but somewhere like Norfolk and Suffolk, they're in the 20s in terms of their percentage, but Gloucestershire and Devon and Cornwall are down below, kind of just under 10% and just below. So just, I think that's why we put that data in there.
And you can see that over the last 12 months it's improved anyway. It's down to 14%.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think some of this is a compliance issue, but some of it can be driven through, you know, you'll be well aware at the moment we're looking about a new mobile data system, which amongst many other things, stop and search be one of the things that we use to record that on, which will then, you can drive some of this behaviour through the IT system in the future.
Yeah, great. No more questions on that, but that is a really helpful assurance slide to have had. We don't need that in every pack, but it is useful to revisit, I think.
And this just gives state of the nation in terms of the workforce at the moment, which, you know, it says what it says. You can see what we've got in Neighbourhood Police in there, and you can see what our workforce looks like across the board.
And those neighbourhood teams, I've looked at the data from this time last year. So obviously there's been a lag in terms of the neighbourhood investments and when people kind of came into the force. But my understanding is that in terms of full-time equivalents across those, across the last year, that those, obviously it says that the uplift is met, but actually the numbers overall, both of police officers and PCSOs, are both higher than they were a year ago.
Yeah, so off the top of my head, I think in the last financial year we were talking about an extra 32 police officers and an extra 20 PCSOs. I'm saying that off the top of my head, I'd stand to be corrected, and a further 17 police officers during the course of this financial year.
Yeah, great. And then just a question about the kind of the numbers at the bottom: special constables, volunteers and cadets. Obviously for us in North Yorkshire, that's a really important cohort of policing, particularly events and community engagement, the community engagement end of things. Just what's the force's approach to kind of supporting and developing those roles within the force, separate to obviously the core business of police officers and PCSOs and police staff?
So the area that I suppose is most pertinent to me at the moment is special constables. We've seen people join the special constabulary generally for one of two reasons. You get people who just simply want to do something voluntary in their local community and see being a special constable is a really good way to do that. And those people tend to do it for many, many years. And we've got some brilliant people who do that. You then have, and historically, particularly during the times of austerity when policing wasn't recruiting many police officers, you have people who join the special constabulary to learn a bit more about how to be a police officer. And they know that when it comes to apply to be a police officer, the fact that they've been a special, they've been involved in certain work, they've got experience of dealing with conflict management and things like that, it gives them a better opportunity to be accepted as a regular officer. We've lost a lot of special constables because they joined the regular force in recent years, which has seen that number come down. And because we have been consistently recruiting police officers, not just because of the neighbourhood uplift we've had over the last 2 years, but going back to 2019, we've constantly been recruiting. That's impeded our ability to recruit special constables, but we are about to go out again now to recruit special constables. So what I'd say is, if you want to really give something back to your community, and the opportunity to work with North Yorkshire Police and support us in making your community safer, we'd really welcome people who want to be a special constable. And what I'd say is, you'll be able to see the tangible difference you can make in your community, but also working as a volunteer police officer, you gain all sorts of transferable skills that are transferable into whatever line of work you do for a living anyway. Skills around organization management, judgment, managing conflicts, decision making. These are all very transferable skills that you get whilst volunteering with us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And certainly the special constables that I've met, they're the epitome of public service in every sense. No, I completely echo all of that. Thank you for that. I think that's the last of the performance slides. Brilliant. Thank you so much. So we'll now move on to the thematic presentation, which is the presentation about artificial intelligence and live facial recognition. And we have DCI Jez Bartlett to present. Just Jez, I'll hand over to you in a second. Just in terms of introduction, I think this was scheduled before we knew about the live facial recognition proposals for North Yorkshire. And obviously we have had separate conversations about that away from the online public meeting. But just for the public's awareness, that the assurance questions that I've asked the police around that are available on the police fire and crime area of the Combined Authority website. So if people want to see the more detailed response to those assurance questions, those are available for anyone to see. And if they've got further questions that they want to ask via me, that they can get in touch with me at any point. But I will hand over, Jez, to you, if that's okay, to take us through the presentation.
Thank you, Ma'am. I'm Jez Bartley. I work in intelligence and covert policing. As we said, I think this was put in the diary before we talked about live facial recognition, and artificial intelligence does weave into live facial recognition, but isn't technically a live AI tool. So I'll explain that as we go along and give some reassurances. Move on to the next slide. So the National Police Chiefs Council have an AI strategy, and they've got some 3 simple priorities, which is to enhance productivity, tackle crime and harm, and to counter the threat from AI. Move on to the next slide.
Just one question on that. Just in terms of the NPCC, the National Police Chiefs Council strategy on AI, just an assurance question really, that in North Yorkshire, that's what we're following. We're not doing anything different to that National Police Chiefs strategy, or are we adapting it for use here?
No.
Shall I come in on that? Sorry to interrupt, Jez. More broadly, as the Innovation Lead Deputy Mayor, I'm happy to give the reassurance that we draw in our own AI and machine learning policy several strands of national guidance. That includes GDPR and data protection and the principles around lawful and transparent use of AI and accuracy in its use and the integrity and confidentiality of the data. We draw on the College of Policing's data ethics checklist. And to your example, then we also draw on the National Police Chief Council's 6 principles of AI, which broadly include the fact that it needs to be explainable and responsible and accountable, and probably critically that the human must ultimately verify and approve the content that's produced by AI, if that makes sense, if that answers your question.
It does. That's really helpful. And I think, in terms of public assurance, that's the assurance that people want. We're not doing anything particularly different to other areas, but equally, this is also something that is being regulated nationally for all those public assurance reasons that people are asking about here. So sorry to have interrupted you. You can carry on with your presentation.
Thank you. I've titled this Artificial Intelligence versus Machine Learning, but in reality, machine learning is a type of AI, and it's just about knowing the differences between the two and how that relates to live facial recognition as we come on to. So AI is the analysis of data to model some aspects of the world, and it takes inferences from these models and then used to predict anticipated possible future events. So in reality, AI is a system that is going to be built that will have that intelligence model that would make decisions a human would normally. Whereas machine learning is a type of AI where computers find the patterns and they'll solve problems that they've been explicitly programmed to do. Those are based around algorithms and new data that continually has that learning cycle, which is where live facial recognition technology has come from. So that's where the link is within the live facial recognition arena. Next slide, please. So I think this is what ACC Mosley was talking about around the principles that come from the national NPC policy, and also what we take in all areas of our use of AI as well. So it does need to be lawful, as you would expect, transparent. So wherever we use it, it will be blatantly obvious that we're using it. We will have it out there, making sure that the transparent use is there and available for all. We must explain what the output is, and therefore what are the sources that AI tool has taken in order to come to that conclusion. And it needs to be responsible so that we know that we have all the policies and procedures in place to safeguard the output. And part of that will mean that we have someone responsible for either the system or the officer in the case if they're using that for whatever tool or tactic they need. And then lead it on to having that robust analysis of the data that is then emitted from the AI tool, so that we can then look at the data quality and satisfy ourselves that what is actually being extracted is truthful and we can rely on it.
Great, thank you. Just a couple of questions. I've had quite a number of people who've asked me about this, but the transparency question, just how will we ensure that transparency is kind of maintained in a North Yorkshire sense, so once this is being used locally, and then just in terms of the accountability question, again, just for us in North Yorkshire, how will that accountability process work for us here? So transparency and accountability, but a question what the North Yorkshire context of that is going to be.
So depending on the tool, at the moment, AI tools will be used apart from those systems and machine learned that are within their own set within those boundaries, are used as an assistance and intelligence tool to support either our intelligence-led policing or preventative policies and procedures or areas of where we're going to look at targeting those. Where it's used in an evidential field, then it has to go through some very strict checklists to ensure that what we're using is accountable, and we're able to be able to support that with corroborating evidence. It's unlikely at this time that we were using it in evidence, apart from those tools that, like live facial recognition, that are systems in their own right that have been developed by AI, but are then enclosed in their own system with their own safeguards around the providers of those systems, and also the national working groups that have looked at the main outputs of those systems, the logarithms, and the ratios that they're set to.
And in terms of the public, sorry to interrupt, just in terms of the public accountability, so you've got an internal system of accountability in terms of the robustness of the process, but how does the public get the assurance that they might want or need around that they have confidence that everything is happening in an appropriate way, and that that's people's concern in this space, is whether or not anything's happening that they aren't comfortable with, and how do they have assurance that the internal accountability that you have is also in place externally to the public?
So any use of any AI system or AI tool has to go through rigorous checks through our information management department to make sure that, for one, it's legal, as we've already talked about, and for two, that we can trust the security of the data that we're inputting and also the output. But in addition to that, we are governed by the Information Commissioner's Office, who will also inspect us and look at this area as they would live facial recognition as well. So you've got that external, transparent governance that would report back to yourself and the chief and the public, to be able to show that we are following our policies and procedures rigorously.
There's some good points you've raised there, Jez. Deputy Mayor, can I come in on a couple of other points to just
Of
give
course,
some
yes,
further
thank you.
reassurance to the public? So firstly, we mandate in our policy that we've got to be really transparent and clear about its use. So where there's a product, like a summary that's created through AI, we stipulate that must say AI has been used in its creation. That's the first thing. Around the accountability point, we have an internal gateway in the organisation, which is the clearance to introduce an AI tool in any application of policing. That's an innovation board, which I chair and sit on. That's the primary gateway for ensuring that that use is appropriate, it's legitimate, it's proportionate, it's the right thing to do, and it can drive tangible benefits. And that will then track and test and review the use of that AI tool in the application. Obviously, Jez has given some important external reassurance and mechanisms that we know we're transparent and legitimate in its use as well. But probably the most important point is we've stipulated to our staff, you cannot use AI in the first-hand creation of evidence. So, for example, you cannot draft a witness statement or amend it or otherwise create it using AI. That's not permitted. And we've given that really clear guidance to our staff in conjunction with the CPS, who have helped us craft that guidance, making sure it's legitimate. So that's probably the biggest piece of reassurance we want to give.
So that is assuring, and I suppose there is a fine line with balance in this area, isn't there, where you also don't want to not be seeking the advantages that these opportunities present to policing, because we want the productivity and the officer hours saved, that can be saved if it then means that someone's able to spend more time in face-to-face contact with a member of the public. So I completely understand the balance that needs to be struck here, just in terms of that. I mean, I think I'm probably that those probably were the questions and assurances that I was seeking, but I do understand the need for a kind of fine line in this. But Chief Constable wants to come in.
Yeah, and really it was just to pick up on that point is we want to spend, you know, our budget, at the moment we spend 80% of the budget on people's wages, and that means that the productivity of the individuals that work for this organisation is really important in terms of the outcomes that we can deliver for the public. And I look at the possibilities now through the use of technology, particularly I suppose in two ways. One, to reduce the administrative burden of policing. People have been saying to me for the last 30 years that there's too much paperwork in policing. Well, you know, we are in the business on occasions of taking people's liberty, and it's really important that there's a really clear record and rationale of that. Likewise, we deal with very high risk safeguarding scenarios, and we have to record all of that, but there are definitely ways that we can use technology and the possibilities that there are, you know, in front of us now to drastically reduce that. And if we can do that, we must. The second bit is about the allocation of resources. And, you know, if I've seen one huge change over the past 30 years, it's the sophistication by which you target your police resources to have the greatest impact. And by virtue of the fact that this technology can consume the amount of data that no analyst has ever been able to do, and actually give us much greater predictive analysis around offenders, around victims, around locations, it should, in the fullness of time, allow us to deploy resources in a precision-like manner that we've never been able to do before. So providing that we do it in a, as you say, a transparent, accountable, lawful way, we must take advantage of this technology, because absolutely dealing with the future of policing depends on it, because you know and I know there's not a huge pot of money coming in for more and more people to deal with more and more demand.
Unfortunately not. Just, I guess I'm still interested in the counterpoint really, which is we absolutely have to get the assurance piece right, which I think this slide is doing, and these are the national principles being applied, which I completely understand. I guess it's the counterpoint of how do you also then make sure that you're not going too slowly, as in the assurance is slowing things down so quickly that actually we're not optimizing the opportunity enough. But equally getting that balance right in terms of assurance. And I suppose the question behind that point is, how regularly are we going to be reviewing the use in North Yorkshire to ensure that we're getting that balance right between the public assurance, accountability, transparency point and the productivity opportunity point, and just whether or not, given the pace at which this stuff is moving, that we're getting the balance of review right, so that we're not missing an opportunity as well as capitalizing on the opportunity that's there in the right way.
I mean, if I can come back in on that point, Deputy Mayor. So I chair the Innovation Board, and on a bi-monthly basis, we effectively scan for and consider opportunities for AI. North Yorkshire are now the lead force for the region in terms of innovation. So we draw on national learning, we draw on regional learning, and share our experiences across the rest of the region and the country. I'm very happy to give a couple of examples of things we're trialing, if that helps now, or perhaps at the end of the presentation, as you wish.
Yes, time at the end of the presentation,
Okay.
but that is really helpful. And actually, just the fact that that innovation board is meeting every other month and looking at this, I think probably is the assurance point in the broader sense. But I think, you know, from a public accountability perspective, this is a balance. But equally, there is a lot of opportunity here, as well as the need for, you know, the right appropriate levels of accountability and assurance for the public. So, Jez, sorry, we've completely hijacked your slides, but you can move on to the next slide if that's okay.
Yeah, just on that point, if I may, there's also a national police AI being set up through the NPCC that's looking at pulling everyone's innovative ideas across England and Wales to be able to bring that together and share that learning and develop it as well. So that on a national level and a regional and local, it is joined up. So I think this probably reassures you from a local point of view. These are our key messages that go out to our officers and staff on the use of AI tools, and that is that no personal, sensitive or confidential information should be entered into AI tools. Users must log in on their own business accounts and not private accounts. It must support and not replace our professional judgment or expertise. All outputs must be reviewed and validated before use. And again, that transparency is there in an annual formal report or document. We shall be declaring AI was used in that formulation. And lastly, but probably most importantly, is being aware of the potential bias. So AI is only as good as the data that's put into it. So, for example, if you are a male white Caucasian, put in my learning into say Copilot, it will start to learn my unconscious biases, and that's something I have to be aware of in order to know that it will think like me, which is not necessarily neurodiverse. So that's the sort of learning that we take from that. So
just a question about that, because I think that's certainly my experience, is that it very quickly amplifies your own personality back at you. But I guess it's a training question about how North Yorkshire Police are delivering that training, and how we're ensuring that that's happening in a consistent way, and that people kind of recognise, exactly as you're saying, those potential biases and stereotypes, and the fact that it won't be the same for everyone. People might actually experience those things differently.
yeah, it's well, it's out there for and circulated to all officers. It in any new system or AI tool that's introduced, there is pilots and testing to be able to look for these areas of potential unconscious and system formulated biases, so that we can then feed that out when the rollout across the force comes into play. So we're already aware of those potential pitfalls before it goes live, and we can warn officers and staff that that's what we need to be aware of and what we need to look out for.
Great, thank you. That's very helpful.
And moving on to live facial recognition here, just to make you aware, there's 3 types of facial recognition that the police currently use, and North Yorkshire Police don't use all of them, and I'll go through them. So live facial recognition is what we're looking to develop and utilise in the coming months, and that is really where we have a live stream of footage that captures images of people walking past, and then that is matched against a watch list of people who are wanted, etc., etc., that I'll come through the rationale for who goes on the watch list a bit later. Then you've got retrospective facial recognition, which is where we might get a picture of a burglar on CCTV, and we'll run that through our systems and the Police National database to be able to identify that person. And then the last one is officer initiated facial recognition, which is where an officer on the street who is speaking to a subject can take a picture of that person, and then that matches or searches our national police database to see whether that's a match, whether that person's wanted, to ID them, or any of the other safeguards that are in place. That is being trialled in South Wales, Gwent and the Metropolitan Police at the moment. We don't have that capability, but it's just in case people do hear that across social media, you know the differentiation between the two.
Yeah, there's a lot of chatter about the different technology, and so I think that's really helpful to understand that the technology that's being talked about for North Yorkshire is the first one, if that's right. Well, can I just ask, I mean, you've explained the difference in the slide, but is it the same broad technology that sits behind it? And if so, I kind of assume that there are things built into it, like if someone's cut their hair or grown a beard or whatever, all of those things are factored in to the scanning that the cameras would be doing.
Yeah, so the system's an algorithm based on that machine learning that we talked about earlier. So it looks for identifying features to be able to quickly match that with those on the watch list that it's already run through its systems and knows what that algorithm is to match. That system is NeoFace, run by NEC for the live facial recognition. The retrospective facial recognition we use through the Police National database, and the officer initiated facial recognition, again, that is through NEC as well. That's a different type of facial recognition though.
Okay, thank you. We can move on to the next one.
So there's an APP that's been developed, that's an authorised professional practice, which is national guidance on how forces should use and implement live facial recognition. This is something that we're following in North Yorkshire, and it just ensures that we deploy responsibly, it's transparent, and it's proportionate to what we're trying to achieve. So facial recognition will go through a number of tests within an application. One of those is that we've tried other methods, and this is the least intrusive. or other less intrusive have failed to achieve the objectives. The deployment's got to be targeted, can't be really broad, and it needs to have a timescale to it as well. There will be public notification, so that we'll have a front-facing live facial recognition North Yorkshire web page that will publish our up-and-coming deployments. It will show the results that we have, the analysis of those results, and also have a direct email address to come into the team to be able to answer those questions and probably free up the freedom of information requests that I know have come about from other forces that have trialled this. Also, yourself, Ma'am, will have an oversight, and you'll be made aware of these deployments when they're authorised, so that you will be able to have that oversight as well, and you'll be aware of those up and coming. So really, the aim of the APP came about from a legal challenge with South Wales Police in 2000, and this seeks to secure those findings really around balancing crime prevention with individuals' rights and freedoms.
Just a question really, it comes back to the proportionality point, which I know we've discussed separately, but it does link into this kind of public oversight element of that slide. Is just what types of offences we're talking about here in terms of the capturing and the types of offender that you're likely to be looking for using live facial recognition, and whether or not those will be, I guess, the more serious offenders, or whether it's anyone who's got a facial recognition capture, so therefore could include relatively low level offending as well as serious offending.
So the whole basis is to prevent and detect crime. So if there's an intelligence case to suggest that a person that's wanted either by the courts or for an offence within North Yorkshire, and depending on what the event might be, it might be wider. If we go to other forces for their watch list for, I don't know, if we think there's a violence incident going to happen, and we know that two groups, rival groups, are meeting up to, and some violence may occur, then we will then look to ask for images of people that are likely to be at that event or involved or members of that gang. So it won't be everyone that's wanted, it will be what's targeted to that deployment, that incident or that event.
But it could be multi-force, so an event where you know you've got people travelling into North Yorkshire, for example, that you might ask neighbouring forces or include data from neighbouring forces.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
On
That's
their
really
agreement,
helpful.
obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Their data, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that was it on that slide. Thank you.
So these are the criteria that we need to meet in the application to be able to deploy. So like I said before, it's got to be intelligence-led, got to have a reason for it. It's got to be targeted to what we're looking for or what we're looking to prevent, and it's got to be proportionate. So the most likely use of it would be to identify those wanted for criminal offences or by the courts, etc. But it can also include preventative measures. So, for example, preventing people from entering areas. An example that might be football banning orders, especially when we see that York have obviously gone up a division, might be playing, larger or attracting larger crowds and things like that. So that's something that might be on the agenda. But also to locate people where intelligence suggests that they might be vulnerable or at risk at harm as well. So your high risk missing people, potential people are on registered sex offenders orders and things like that we might want to prevent from going to certain events for a safety element. And also if we know that there's an incident going to occur that could involve violence, then we could deploy to that to be able to use it as a preventative measure to try and negate that violence from occurring.
And just in terms of the deployment itself is done via presumably a van or some kind of fixed location. Presumably there's nothing you can do to prevent people just avoiding that part of an area, or is it deliberately targeted to an area where people don't have any option but to walk through?
No, everyone will have an option to walk the other way if they so wish to, and that's part of what's built into the APP. That doesn't mean that might, with other intelligence-led information, lead to those people being stopped, but it's their right and their freedom to walk the other way. We won't be corralling and forcing people through the videos and the capture. That goes against the principles.
Okay, that's fine. Yep, we can move on to the next question. Next slide, sorry.
So I think we've covered some of this, how it actually works. So it will take a snapshot of a subject's face and then match that to the watch list to see whether the algorithms meet, and then that will then flag up to an operator in the van who will have that human eye and decision making over whether they put that out to the engagement officers outside of the van that are positioned to engage in man in a red top, please stop that person, he's wanted for burglary potentially. And then they will then do their due diligence as they would on the streets if they stopped someone they thought was wanted for whatever offence or to prevent someone from entering an area, and use their policing skills and other indices that will help them formulate their opinion of if that person is truly that person that the system identifies. That is a biometric template, and as such, we are governed by the Surveillance and Biometric Commissioner as well as the Information Commissioner. So the government are looking at trying to identify a single body that will look at live facial recognition as it becomes more prevalent throughout and used throughout the UK. But that is something that the Home Office are looking at and working through at the moment. But that's another external Commissioner's office that will be looking at us internally when we start using this this tactic. So
And
the
can I just one question quickly about that biometric template and the kind of, there were lots of rumours when this technology was first being used, and I think there were some challenges around it having bias in the software. Anything that you can update us on in terms of how the technology now works and what the learning has been from the pilots that have happened in I think it was part of the Metropolitan Police, and was it Wales somewhere, where they also piloted this, and just what the learning has been in terms of that, which I know is in the public kind of assurance questions, is just around that bias in the software and whether or not those issues, there's now better assurance around that.
Yeah, so as it came out of the initial legal challenge to South Wales, part of that learning was and direction from the courts was to have that rigorous testing of the systems to be able to ensure the public that this wasn't and didn't have those biases that you talk about. So the National Physical Laboratory was tasked with doing extensive tests, and they did tests on sample sizes of up to 10,000 people, which is obviously quite rigorous, and provided a level of the algorithm that performed in a way that didn't have biases, and also came back with the highest amount of positive results without the positive negatives. So someone was stopped and found not to be that person. That is now a national designated figure that all live facial recognition used with this technology is set to.
And certainly that's part of the assurance that I know that the Police, Fire and Crime Directorate will be looking at through the oversight board or whatever it is that we have for this technology when it's being used. Those are exactly the kind of things I would imagine those boards, I think it's the ethics board, that will look at this just to ensure that that is exactly how it's working how it's supposed to work. But that's really helpful, thank you. Next slide.
So these are just some of the consideration that have been highlighted, and probably the main things that I think some of the public will want answering. So what happens if I walk through the field of vision and I'm captured? What happens to my image? Well, that image, if you don't match the watch list, is deleted in 0.2 of a second. So that's a fifth of a second, and there's no way we can get that back. It's gone. It's set to that default on the system on purpose to maintain the public support and anonymity, so that we won't be able to go back and say, oh, did that person walk past that, or was it captured, his biometrics or their biometrics captured. The next one was around is it an AI system making decisions? Well, no, it's a standalone algorithmic system that's been developed by machine learning AI, but it's set in its own box, so to speak, so that it's contained. It can be turned off at any point. So if we feel that for whatever reason there's some errors with the readings, or there's a threat to people's safety or the van's safety, then we can close that down immediately and cease operating, so that there won't be any further errors if that's what we're looking for, or any other safeguarding issues. The next one, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no questions. That's great. Thank you.
The next one we've already talked about, so the National Physical Laboratory, and you can go online and see that report or a summary of that report that will tell you exactly what they did, how they did it, and what their error rate was. And we've talked about the independent scrutiny from external commissioners there. And you, Mum's talked about how we will be feeding back into the Independent Ethics Board and the Scrutiny and Oversight Board as well. Like I said, all deployments are recorded, they will be reviewed, and they will be published on our website. So it really is that transparent, public-facing tool that we'll be using, and everyone will be able to see what the errors are, what the successes are, how many people have walked through that field of vision, and all the data surrounding our deployments. Any errors or false alerts are automatically reviewed and fed back into the national governance, so that they can look at that and ensure that it's not something wider afield, or they might be able to advise and suggest how and why that's happening because of the way we're deploying it. That hasn't happened in the forces that are already deploying it, and the majority of forces have reported no false alerts. The only errors that appeared were around brothers, siblings, and things like that, where potentially identical twins and things like that have caused an error, where I know a brother was stopped in London, and he formed part of the legal challenge that came at the beginning of this year.
Great, thank you. I guess my final question, because I think that is the final slide, is just when is it likely to be used, and then whether or not there'll be updates in a public forum like this in the performance pack, for example, about how much it's being used, and what the performance of the technology has been in terms of proportionality, a bit like we have with the stop and search assurance slide. So 2 questions really. 1, when's it going to be used? And then 2, what the assurances are likely to be in a kind of regular updating in a public setting sense.
So when is a question for when the applicants come in with their proposal to use the tactic. We're looking at events throughout the summer and moving into to autumn, but it does depend on the availability of West Yorkshire Police's vans, because they hold the 2 vans for the region. So, for example, I have asked for to use the vans on one occasion, but they were already being used. So it's part of that early warning process that I can get those vans secured to be able to use them, and we can go further afield to other areas that have got vans that are housed within those forces as well. But it is dependent on that at this time, although we are exploring other options.
Yeah, then there's a proportionality. Now we've got to the point where we want to use it. I guess the question is, how do we ensure that we're high enough up the queue to now then get access to it when we do want it?
It's getting them booked early, making sure we've got that. Obviously, it will be reliant on the chief officer team, and I'll probably let the chief come in there, because I think he's probably got an answer for that.
Well, I think, to well, I am keen to get on with this. I think it's really important technology. I think there is an issue about the van availability because they've been supplied on a regional basis. And I think because we have taken the time to properly work through everything that Jez has just talked about, we may not, I think the other forces in the region that are using this perhaps have got their schedule of events lined up a little bit before ours, and it's certainly on a first come first served basis. But I will be picking that up with the other chiefs to make sure that we get our fair share of a regional asset, and I shall say no more than that. But I do expect it to be used in North Yorkshire in the coming months. And I think as Jez has just covered over the past 20 minutes or so, it is an important tool in terms of making sure that people who are wanted, who do present a threat to the communities of North Yorkshire, are identified as quickly and as simply as possible. But we do that in a way that is transparent so the public can see it.
Great. And just to my other question about the assurance in terms of public data once we are using it, maybe this is one for a future point, but once we've used it, there'll come a point where it would be useful to be putting some information regularly in the public domain.
Well, I think in the first instance, as Jez has said, we'll publish stuff on the website in the first instance. I think probably as it starts, this is not like stop and search where you've got cumulative data over a year, but I think there will come a point at some point. Now that might be 12 months hence, where we look at a 12-month period, and then I think you get into I think legitimate questions for me to be asked is: are you using it more? Are you using it less? Is the performance in terms of the number of people that it identifies over time getting better or getting worse? And there could be many reasons for that. But we will learn as we go along, and absolutely, I expect that on behalf of the public, you'll want to ask me some questions around that. So certainly there'll be, I think, the opportunity to bring it back to this forum at some stage. And I think in answer to your first point is, in the fullness of time, once we've got meaningful trend data, it is something that would feature as part of the performance pack.
Great. Brilliant. Thank you. And thank you, Jez, for the slides. I think that is the last one, isn't it?
It is. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Really interesting stuff. You are welcome to stay with us for the remainder of the meeting, but equally, if you choose to now leave the meeting, no one will judge you unfairly for it. So feel free to stay if you're needed for any other part of the meeting, or if you want to. But we will be moving on to just some spotlight questions. And there have been...
Deputy Mayor, sorry to interrupt. Did you want me to come back in with a couple of other AI examples that we're
Yes, please
using?
do. Yes, please do.
It very, very briefly, I mean, just to give some examples, and we talked through the safeguards that we've put in place to ensure the use is legitimate and considered. But in short, so the first is we've procured an AI-enabled CCTV analysis tool for a period of 12 months to support a pilot within our teams to investigate very large quantities of CCTV, usually through major crime, but also serious and organised crime. In summary, the technology has the potential to significantly reduce the time and resource it takes to screen massive volumes of CCTV and digital video evidence. And the idea is that it scans potentially evidential footage for further review by investigators that significantly therefore reduces the volume of material requiring that initial manual initial examination. So as an example, if we wanted to now view hundreds of hours of CCTV that's been trawled from the City of York for a crime, where we want footage with a man wearing a white shirt and a black tie to be drawn out, effectively we can put that into the system. It will, we think, within about 10 to 15 minutes, do the equivalent work of trawling hundreds and hundreds of hours of CCTV. It's an initial screening tool, basically, that will just massively increase the time and be of significant investigative benefit to our teams. It's safe. We've gone through all of the rigors and the safeguards and the gateways to be able to authorize its use. So we're piloting out with a historic major crime investigation to thoroughly understand the benefits, and then we can apply that going forward.
Great.
In another example, we're also piloting the use of the Tackling Organisation Exploitation Capability Platform. That's a free system that's available to police forces, which we were one of the first to get hold of in the region. We've effectively combined that platform with an internally developed co-pilot-based AI agent to support our offender management processes, which can take considerable time. And in simple terms, under the pilot, statutory offender visits are conducted every day, and they're recorded using body-worn video systems by our safeguarding teams. The recordings are then processed through a safe video transcription capability within that tackling organised exploitation capability platform that I talked about. From that, it produces a transcript of the visit. The transcript is then analysed as part of our pilot by an internally developed co-pilot AI agent, which then assists in populating content within 3 offender management documents required as part of our statutory processes. It won't conduct risk assessments, but what it does is draw out the key elements of the offender management visit to be able to significantly save time. And then we can reinvest that time saved in conducting further visits at a faster pace. Another example that we're really keen to start exploring, and I think we're national leaders here, is in the use of an AI agent to support the review of police national database searches to complete domestic violence disclosure scheme referrals. So the domestic violence disclosure scheme, the DVDS scheme, or Clare's law, obviously enables the police to disclose information to a victim or a potential victim of domestic abuse about their partner or ex-partner if they apply. To collate the information we need to be able to respond to that request for information, we review masses of data on the police national database, which holds intelligence from all forces across it. What this agent will hopefully do, if we get the approvals at the national level to be able to pilot it, is to assist practitioners by identifying and collating all of that relevant information across the country, assessing it, and then bringing it to the attention of the human in the process to be able to prioritise what information they then disclose. And again, that can introduce some real efficiencies and safeguards. I mean, those are just a few AI examples. We're leading lots of other non-AI robotic process automation innovation across the force and other approaches as well. So a lot of significant work at pace in this area.
Great. Yeah, that is really helpful. And I think, it's all about working out how this world is beneficial, and it sounds like the work that the Innovation Board is doing is in trying to ensure that North Yorkshire Police are optimising that opportunity, not least because we have all those other challenges to grapple with around rurality and geography, and actually not having the same level of policing resources that you would have in another area. So that, yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Is there anything, do we need to do anything else on that item? ACC Mosley, can I release Jez? If you would like to leave, you're welcome to leave the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So much for your slides and your presentation. We're going to move on to the spotlight questions, and I just had a few things that have been either particularly pertinent in the public domain or that have just come to my awareness that I just wanted to ask about. The first one of those was just about coverage recently in the media about the North Yorkshire Police approach to equality, diversity and inclusion initiatives and cultural awareness training. Just really to ask for an explanation of that cultural awareness training and the purpose that it has in policing, and how the police are ensuring that that is being delivered effectively across the force.
Yeah. Well, there was some media footage that relates to an employment issue. I won't comment on that specifically. But I mean, my approach to matters inclusion, I've talked about this quite a lot in the past, is what we do not do in North Yorkshire Police is virtue signalling. I have been very, very clear in my approach to events such as Pride. I've been very, very clear in my approach and view of how we manage protest and do it objectively, managing the rights of people who protest with the rights of people affected by a protest. That does not mean that inclusion is not important. Inclusion, in my view, is about good business sense. I want an organisation that contains people from all backgrounds who think differently whether it's because of their race, religion, sexuality, gender, matters not. I need an organisation of people who are different, because if you have that, you then create an organisation where people will challenge each other to get better. And we are in the business in North Yorkshire Police of getting better to provide a better service to our communities. Because of the nature of what we do, it is also vitally important that we understand the different communities that we serve. And you know, let's be honest, North Yorkshire Police is not the most diverse, or North Yorkshire is not the most diverse county in the country, but we have pockets of diversity amongst our communities. And I think that where you have more disparate, diverse communities, you know, officers and staff might never have come across them if they've, you know, they lived in parts of North Yorkshire and might not have the understanding. You know, I gained a lot of understanding of different communities of spending most of my policing career working in, you know, inner city metropolitan areas where you can't not absorb yourself in different cultures and communities. But it's really important. So we commissioned cultural awareness training for that purpose. It was an absolutely valid, important part of training our workforce, and I absolutely stand by it. It is important that we understand our communities. This is not about picking out any particular race or religion above another. It is about making sure that we have good cultural awareness amongst our staff. We create an inclusive working environment where everyone who works for this organisation feels that they, one, belong, two, are valued, and three, have a voice that will be listened to in terms of challenging the organisation to get better. And it's also vital that we have an organisation that understands all the different communities across North Yorkshire. That said, I say this because you know, I've heard a lot in the presses. That does not mean that we seek to deliver different outcomes for different communities. It is a fact, everyone is equal under the law, and I am determined as the Chief Constable of this county that we will hold ourselves to a very, very high standard in that regard. You know, if you commit a crime in this county, we are here to deal with it. If you are a victim of crime, no matter who you are, we are here to support you, and we will seek to provide the very best service that we can within the resource constraints that we've got. So our approach to cultural awareness, diversity, inclusion, whatever label you want to put on it, for me it's not an add-on. It is definitely not about virtue signalling, definitely not. It is about good business sense, making this organisation be the best that it possibly can.
Great, thank you for that. And another one that's been in the public domain that I was just keen, because I know that we've been corresponding about it outside of the public domain, but Linton-on-Ouse and all the speculation in the public domain about the Home Office proposals for the site. Really, what public assurances you can give around public safety and those proposals?
Yeah, I mean, I take a very objective view of this. Linton-on-Ouse is a tiny little village at the moment that, you know, it's part of our neighbourhood policing footprint. What I'd say is this, if there is a decision to change the use of the former site at RAF Linton-on-Ouse, and there are policing implications that emanate out of that, we will be prepared for it. You know, I'll make sure that I have got you know, the command structure and the understanding of the intelligence. But until I know exactly what it is, it's very difficult for me to speculate on what that might be. My understanding is that you know, the government are now undertaking a period of due diligence to examine the suitability of the site. Is my understanding, and I, you know, we're engaged in that, and we'll continue to be engaged in that. And you know, we will make sure that we provide the requisite and proportionate policing response to it.
Great, thank you. And certainly my my wider, I mean, we've obviously been corresponding about this in terms of that wider public safety point, but just for the public awareness, also North Yorkshire Police, North Yorkshire Council, the Mayor and I have all been trying to ensure that we're putting the public concerns forward very clearly, and also trying to ensure that that public safety point is paramount in any consideration, and that work will be ongoing, and as soon as there is any further update, that it will be put in the public domain. But at the moment, I think that is where we are. We're making those representations in all directions, particularly to the Home Office, to try and ensure that the accurate understanding of what the implications would be are properly understood, and as soon as we know any more, that we'll put that in the public domain. That was all I needed on that one. And then I just wanted to ask you, because it's Road Safety Month, and my understanding is that there have been some improvements around Operation Snap, which I know that some campaigners around road safety have been particularly interested in. So I just wanted to ask what those changes have been and what impact people could expect off the back of them.
Yeah, so I mean, the simple fact of the matter is, and you know, it's been brought to my attention, the demand of submissions has gone up exponentially without the requisite increase in resources. So just to give you an example, we had 784 submissions in 2022. In 2025, we had 2,962, and we've already had a significant number of submissions already this year. It is continuing to rise exponentially. We have taken it away from where it's at before. It now sits in our desktop investigation team, which means that we've got a greater body of resource that we can put to it. We're already seeing a significant increase in the number of prosecutions that are emanating out of Operation Snap, and the time taken to do that is decreasing significantly. It is really important. It's a really important tool in our way of enforcing high standards of driving across the county. You'll be aware, Deputy Mayor, and you know it's my view, we have too many people who are killed on the road in this county. It is a fact of the matter, and one person being killed on the road is too many. And you know, we take a variety of different approaches to that around, you know, our education programs. We work with the Road Safety Partnership, where we look at road engineering, and you're well aware of my views around the fact that the county does need a network of fixed speed cameras to assist with road safety. But an important part of enforcement is about identifying poor standards of driving and dangerous driving, and some of that we do through our roads policing teams that are out and about on the county 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. But some of that is by the public when they identify it. If they've got a dash cam, sending it in to us, and if it does amount to a criminal offence, we'll deal with it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, it has been something that's been raised with me consistently over the last 2 years, both in surgeries with individuals, but also, you know, stakeholders, particular stakeholders who feel like particular, for example, vulnerable road users who have raised real concerns about it. So I think that's really welcome, and it will be really interesting to see in the coming months what difference that might make. So thank you for that update. And then just finally, because it's happened in the last few days, just a question about arson, which has come up with me. I was at a public meeting in Helmsley on Friday morning, but there've also been a spate of arson incidents, not just over the last few days, but over it feels like the last few years across the city of York. Just really what work is taking place between police and fire. Obviously fire is a lead agency in terms of making sure that arson incidents, when they happen, are extinguished, but there is a wider kind of criminal element to some of that, and just sometimes the out of court or the kind of informal community-based resolution is the way through that, and sometimes the criminal route is the more appropriate one. Just understanding what those liaisons are between police and fire, when fire might be the lead agency in terms of public education, and when police would take the lead. Just some reassurance really around that work.
Well, I mean, the first thing, particularly in terms of the city of York, it is important. Criminal damage and arson is down 13.5% this year. So I do get public perception around this, and we know at this time of year that we do see an increase in this sort of thing, and some of it is deliberate offending. Some of it is about discarded barbecues, people not disposing of litter properly. You know, you leave a glass bottle in a rural area where there is tinderbox vegetation, that can cause a fire quite easily. You know, in terms of, do we work closely with the fire service? Absolutely, we do. We have a program now where we make sure that any instance of fire that they attend, where there's a suggestion it's deliberate ignition, or there's a suspicion of that, that it's reported to us via the fire service, so we can get an accurate picture of what's going on. You know, we've got a joint problem solving plan. We do undertake some targeted patrols. We refer young people into the fire safe intervention program, you know, which balances enforcement with education, deals with prevention and safeguarding aspects of that. You know, that's now been reinstated. There's more than 20 people been referred into that scheme since it was reinstated earlier on this year. There is a monthly antisocial behaviour fires meeting that's chaired by the Director of Community Risk and Resilience within the fire service that we're involved. So that makes sure that we have got good oversight of hotspots, trends, and can make sure that we provide effective problem solving around that. It's not just the fire service, and you know I will say this again, particularly where we're looking at bin fires. The local authority have got a role to play in this. You know, we must be looking at emptying some of these bins on a more frequent basis, because you know you cannot set on fire an empty metal bin. So I couldn't let this question go without mentioning that.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I'll ensure that council colleagues from North Yorkshire Council and City of York Council are aware. That was all my spotlight questions. So I think we can move on to the third party reports, which I think is ACC Moseley and the HMIC updates.
Okay, I think we've got a slide deck, haven't we? There we go. Okay, so to come to the first slide, yeah, there we go. So this is basically an overview of where we are with our recommendations. From our previous but one peel inspection 3, all recommendations have been closed, and that's a positive position, because sometimes forces find themselves in the position where they've got what we call enduring AFIs, where there's areas for improvement that are carried through 2 inspection series. We weren't in that position, in the sense we were able to close all of those down prior to our most recent inspection, which is 527 inspection. In terms of that most recent inspection, then we had no causes for concern and 8 areas for improvement that are documented in the report, and we'll come on to discuss further in a moment. They're all currently under assessment, and we'll update obviously on progress in subsequent meetings here. In terms of then the areas for improvement from other reports, so we had 4 from a previous custody inspection, albeit because custody now falls within the peel inspection series, we believe those will be closed. And then we also had 4 from a serious and organised crime inspection, but some of those recommendations included ones for the region as a whole and not just specific to North Yorkshire. The national thematic report recommendations referred to recommendations from national reports sent to all forces that aren't graded essentially. We've seen a slight decrease in the number of outstanding areas for improvement in this category from the last update, which is obviously positive. But there are also 10 recommendations that have just been received, which we'll come on to, and they include areas around the diversion of children away from the criminal justice system, and the policing response to online sexual abuse, and the management of registered sex offenders. So that's a broad overview. And then on the second slide, I think we've got the trajectory of those areas for improvement over the course of the last 18 months or so. You'll see the obvious steady reductions over the course of that period, which reflects the considerable effort actually that's gone into addressing those areas for improvement from the previous but one inspection in 2023, and obviously all of the other thematic inspections that have been reported on since. More recently, that small uptick in areas for improvement towards the end of the chart is because of the comparatively small number of areas for improvement generated in the most recent peel report. And I think we go on to that now. So on this slide, we can see a summary of those areas for improvement from our most recent report, and we're obviously working through those to draw out the learning and address the areas for improvement. Deputy Mayor, I'm very happy to go through all of these, or as many or as few of them as you wish. And I can
It
provide
was a general
explanation.
question I had, really, in terms of the under assessment terminology, in terms of where the force is at with that under assessment piece of work for the 25-27 areas for improvement. Just what does that mean in terms of the force? What's going on behind the scenes, and what's the kind of timescale in terms of updates?
So I think in simple terms, we've accepted them, and the force is now going through the leadership structures to say, what's the plan? I think it's as simple as that. So we have in our governance a meeting series called the Portfolio Assurance Meetings. Essentially, the business leads who oversee those areas for improvement are now sat down with their tacticians, with their leaders to say, right, here's this area for improvement. What's the plan to remediate the issue, to see through improvement against that issue, and what's the timescales? So there's really tight grip around what we're doing and when are we going to do it, in short. And then we can also set a broad deadline for when are we going to go back to the inspectorate and say, in response to the area that you've identified, we've carried out these actions and we propose now that it's ready for closure. That broadly is the process.
Great. Chief Constable, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just, I mean, Ben's covered a bit, but ultimately, the Deputy Chief Constable leads on managing our response to HMSC inspections on my behalf. He runs his risk assurance board that all the ACCs report into. Each one of those AFIs is assigned to one of the ACC portfolios. There is very clear ownership and accountability around it. Ultimately, our response to them has to satisfy the Deputy Chief Constable, because ultimately he puts his signature to a letter to HMIC to say this is what we've done and we believe we've now dealt with it. So in terms of assurance for you that this grit works, I think the fact, we don't have any enduring AFIs, plenty of forces do, and if you look at, I think another 3 reports were published last week from different forces, and I would probably say now, out of the 25 to 27 round of peel inspections, roughly getting on for a third of forces have been through the process now. North Yorkshire's inspection report remains one of the most positive of any force that has been through it thus far.
Great. Yes. And the work is underway to make it even better, I guess.
Indeed.
Is the underlying point of that. Yeah. Just on the particular question 5.3, the supervision of priority 12 incidents, if you could just explain what they are.
Yeah, so we identify calls about incidents that don't require, or we consider that they don't require officers to attend immediately or within an hour, but do nevertheless require attendance within 12 hours. We call those priority 12 incidents. They make up a very, very small proportion of the overall number of calls that the force receives. Now, during the inspection, HMICFRS, the inspectorate body, they found a very small number of calls within that basket that they dip sampled would, in their view, have benefited from some greater management and supervision around the risk. I think it was broadly around refreshing the risk assessments every few hours to make sure our approach was still appropriate and right. Effectively, in addressing that area for improvement, we've already placed additional supervisory structures and processes around those logs to ensure that they are very, very thoroughly risk assessed. And then the more important bit is they are very, very thoroughly reviewed at set intervals, so that we can reassure ourselves if the original consideration was that can wait for a slightly delayed response from the police, then that decision still remains appropriate. But it's a very, very small basket of calls that we're talking about.
Great, thank you. And then just a question about number 5, question 7, of the safeguarding children and adults. Crimes against vulnerable victims. I mean, I guess the concern there is, there'll be a certain cohort of people for whom, if they're a victim of crime, they'll advocate for themselves extremely well. And if things aren't progressing how they would like them to, they'll make that known very clearly. And then there'll be a cohort of victims who may not do that as effectively, and that therefore there's a kind of wider duty to ensure that they aren't disproportionately disadvantaged by the system, if you like. So just to understand what's going on in that AFI and what work might be taking place.
That area for improvement was around a very specific process associated the referrals from other statutory agencies, and whether or not there's a potential crime in some of the referrals that statutory agencies make to us every hour of the day. And they examined, I think, 50 incidents as part of their DIP sample, and found of those 50 incidents, in their view, 31 crimes should have been recorded, but only 22 were in that specific DIP sample. So I think the AFI is themed around making sure that where a victim doesn't report a crime directly to us, but a third party, in this context a statutory agency, does, have we got all the processes to make sure that we are A, recording that crime correctly, and B, recording it promptly within 24 hours as is required in the standards. So we're rapidly doing some work to ensure that all crime referred to us through statutory safeguarding meetings within safeguarding is correctly recorded and recorded within 24 hours.
That's really reassuring. And actually that that kind of wider point about just, you know, those referrals from other agencies, which is ultimately the kind of partnership between the police and others, that relies on those things, those referral processes, but it also then relies on all agencies understanding, you know, the policing role in that is going to be much more criminal justice focused. Other agencies may be focusing on other things, but that's very helpful in terms of an explanation. So thank you for that.
Okay. So unless there's any other queries on that one, then we go on to this slide, and effectively, this broadly shows our peel performance across the last 3 inspection series. As the chief has said, in the most recent inspection, Barrister 25-27, we achieved 6 good ratings, 2 adequate, and 1 requires improvement, with no causes for concern and 8 areas for improvement. And as the chief says, if you look on HMICFRS's website, they publish all of the peel reports across the country. I think you'll see in this most recent inspection series, you'll see that that result is extremely favourable. But we know we've got more work to do. We are focusing on our areas for improvement, but we are in a very positive position.
Great. Yeah, no, it is extremely positive. And, you know, and I've said this publicly before, but I'll just say it again. I know that every time one line of the inspection moves across to the left, one column, you know, it's easy to be kind of flippant about that, but there is an immense amount of work that is going on with police coordinating the things that they're doing in a better way to make that happen. So just not to underestimate the amount of effort that goes from where the force was 5 years ago to where it is now. And I think that is really commendable effort, not just for the senior leadership team, but for the entire force, and the work that all officers and staff are doing every day is the reason that improving picture is there. So yeah, thank you again. I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again.
Okay, thank you. And then this slide, just the key bits to pick off here in terms of current inspection activity. We're awaiting the cybersecurity inspection report. That's a thematic ungraded report that was conducted across the country with some select forces, and it was completed at the start of the year. We don't get fixed dates on when they're going to be published, but our guess is I think probably July, maybe the date. So as soon as we have the findings of that, we can report back here. That's the key point to pick out on that one.
And was that a joint thematic with the Fire and Rescue Service?
It was that one, yes. Where HMI were commissioned to effectively select a number of organisations to do that cyber security thematic inspection, and a number of other agencies and forces, and they'll report back on this summer.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Now, this slide just summarises the areas for improvement on the previous serious and organised crime inspection that actually was conducted in 2024. So near enough 2 years ago, and it was reported last year. Again, happy to pick up all of these. How would you like to play it, Deputy Mayor?
Just anything you think should be highlighted. Otherwise, I didn't have any questions particularly on that because I can see that the work is taking place and the assurance is there in terms of the update, which is obviously anyone can get these slide packs online. So I didn't have any particular questions on that one.
I mean, just the reassurance that activity, both locally and as a region, is against all of those actions. So we're going to be in a position to apply for those areas for improvement to be closed off where we can as soon as we can.
Great. You've got one delivery date that's the end of July. Are we on track with that one, given that it's only a couple of weeks away?
Yeah, that's the way in which offenders with a serious crime prevention order are managed, isn't it? So effectively, that the AFI was around the inspectorate saying that I think best practice is integrated offender management functions that sit within safeguarding should own offenders with a serious crime prevention order. We've agreed that as a chief officer team. That's been approved, so that is in place now. So that once we've completed all of the administration around that, we'll be able to seek closure for that one.
Great, fantastic, thank you. We can move to, I think it's the last slide.
Yeah, and just again, very briefly, this largely summarises the points I've gone through. It effectively provides a summary also of the current planned inspections for the next 3 years. Again, the thematic inspections, we don't know until very shortly before the thematic inspection whether North Yorkshire Police has been selected for them. So we're not clear on whether or not any of those will involve North Yorkshire just yet, but obviously we'll carry on reporting back through this forum when they do.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you for that presentation. So we're nearly at the end. I've just got a couple of public questions that have come in, which I think we're going to put the questions on the slide. One is around, I think the first one is around rural theft and rural crime. Which is there we go, Joanna from Glaisdale, about rural theft and gangs in rural areas, and drones being used to scope out rural areas, and what considerations being given to CCTV, and also where the public meetings with the police will be held. Is that the same question or is that a separate question? I think that's is that a question about this meeting and what this is an online meeting? I haven't clarified that question, but if someone could come back on the rural theft point that Joanna from Glaisdale has raised,
I'll come back on that. I mean, we take rural crime very seriously. That's why we invest in our rural task force, which gets national recognition in terms of its effectiveness, and you know, we will continue to do that. They use a range of techniques, including using drones, placing cameras, ANPR cameras in areas where we know that we have activity, and that means that the intelligence picture that we continue to develop around rural theft is ever growing. For example, we recently got some quad bikes back that have been stolen from a farm in North Yorkshire in the Republic of Ireland. These are organised criminals that are targeting this. We know that. But you know what we've seen over the past couple of years is a reduction in the cost of rural crime. You know, between 2023 and 2024, that went down by 22%. Further reduction in 2024 to 25 of 16%. And that's reported, you know, by the National Rural Crime Forum through the NFU mutual figures. So we are getting some level of independence assurance around that. But what I can assure Joanna is that we do take it very, very seriously. And you know, one of the things that we pride ourselves on in North Yorkshire Police is because of the nature of the geography of the force. You know, we make sure that investment in the rural task force is maintained because we know that it works.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And certainly on that second question, which is on the screen about publicising public meetings, I think that's probably one for me and the PFC team, probably rather than North Yorkshire Police, although it may be that there are other
if it relates to yourself, I mean,
engagements that people could be made aware of.
So our public meetings should all be on our website. They should be publicised on there. I'd have to check around what we do around social media around that, but they're certainly all publicised on our website.
Okay, great. And the same for this online public meeting. We do our best to get it shared into places where we know people will see it. But equally, we're also looking at what else we can do to make the meeting, no offence to anyone on the meeting, more interesting to a wider audience, and how we could perhaps do some of the meetings in person, albeit that we'd be in person together rather than on a number of screens, and see whether that makes any difference. This is a slight COVID legacy that the entire meeting takes place on in the way that it does. Although it does work relatively well, certainly from my perspective. But is there a second question coming up, or was, oh yes, there is one. I thought there was a question from Stephen in York about again, a Linton on Ouse question about the asylum centre. Some of those are tangible questions that I'm not sure we're going to know the answer to yet, because these are all still proposals rather than finite plans. But Stephen's asking about how many people could be accommodated there, and whether statistics about crimes committed across York and North Yorkshire would be published, and whether North Yorkshire Police are employing more officers to deal with this area, or asylum seekers who might be accommodated there.
Well, I suppose to answer, I mean, in terms of his first question, that's not for me as the Chief Constable to answer. That's for immigration and the Home Office to answer in terms of the number of people that are going to be housed there. I couldn't comment on it. I mean, in terms of statistics around, you know, we comply with national guidance around, you know, identifying people who are charged with crimes, and you'll see a number of examples of that where we've published the data around whether someone's an asylum seeker, and we'll continue to comply with national guidance around that. And then the final bit in terms of are we employing more police officers to deal with this area? Well, not at the moment, because there's nothing happening at the moment. It is critical that if there is an additional policing requirement created as a result of this, that it is paid for. That is really, really important, and paid for in full. Because what I would say is that I'm not telling anyone that they don't know, Linton on Ouse is a very rural area, a very small village, and at the moment has a proportionate and commensurate policing footprint. If that is to change, I will make sure that we have the requisite planning around that, but it will require some investments. So I'm paying very careful attention to these proposals as they develop, and absolutely will undertake, with your good self, Deputy Mayor, to liaise with the Home Office, because this will have to be funded from somewhere.
Yeah, and just to assure Stephen, those are exactly some of those questions are exactly the ones that the Chief Constable and I are both raising, particularly around resourcing for any additional policing requirements that might be needed. Those are exactly the kinds of assurances that we are seeking, although I should say that currently these are just proposals, and there are currently no tangible proposals around any kind of numbers of people, and that the Mayor and I are both really clear that this is a strategic site for housing. So Linton on Ouse, that is a significant brownfield site, and the Mayor and I are absolutely determined that all the significant brownfield sites in our patch should be designated for the desperately needed affordable housing that we need in order to have people able to afford to live in our region and work in any job, but also particularly supporting the economy and our public services. So that is the underlying view of the Mayor and I, is that actually this is not a site for this, it's a site for housing, and those are also representations that we are making nationally as well. But thank you to Stephen and to Joanna for your questions. We do take these questions every time, but you can also submit questions outside of the public meeting schedule through the info at email address, which is on the website. And I think those are the last, yes, those are the last items for this particular meeting. So just thank you to the Chief Constable, ACC Moseley and DCI Jez. Oh, I've forgotten his surname, sorry.
Bartley.
Sorry, for his Bartley, sorry, Jez, for your contributions today. The next online public meeting will be in September with the North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service on the 17th of September, and then we're back with North Yorkshire Police again on Thursday the 15th of October. Thank you everyone for your contributions. Thank you to the public for their questions that they've put in, and we'll see you at the next meeting. Thank you.